way of measuring cohesion in a group is a first a set of measures in which we have invested a lot in trying to measure in real time the cohesion of the group. And the second is the moment by moment the leadership. If there is one that you can emerge, one of the person that can emerge as a source or cause of the movement of the others. So it's the leader, in a sense.
But how you notice that?
This could be intrapersonal. For example, in dance you can move, for example, your right wrist and you do movement, you anticipate, and the rest of the joints follow this. And this is the leader, in a sense. No? The movement originates, and the rest of the body.
Starting point.
Yes, this is some that we can call leadership as a person that causes the behavior in others, implicitly or explicitly. And we have done several studies also with my colleagues that are here on measuring, for example, leadership in a group of musicians. And here is based not on individual measures of the single individual, but on group features, like this polygon, that breath, the polygon of the hand, the breath. And there is a unique measure you cannot measure on an individual. Or you can have this as a sort of intrapersonal. You have an orchestra of joints, and then you measure the joints in terms of which joints is the one that is the source of movement, let's say, if I may say that. Yes, or intrapersonal, you can have a movement of the arch that might be something that, in this case, this could be a consequence, for example, of head and body's way, and then you have the arch. Sometimes it could be the head, the source, and the body's way. Yes, no? So this is a sort of consequence, and the leadership is in the head or the trunk, according to the, no?
I mean, this is interesting. For example, we want to do an exercise for inducing distributed leadership rather than having centralized leadership.
Yes,
we have this polygon that breathes and allows us to see where leadership is focused. We can then distribute it in a way. We can facilitate that it moves around in a different. We'll become aware of how leadership is happening, but in order not to centralize it, in order to move it around. We are a group, and we say, oh, now leadership is focused on just one person all the time. Let's distribute it. Let's move it around.
So this can be applied to the ecological studies. For example, study the monkey's behavior in a group.
Yes. These are, of course, there are many directions of research, so we should be careful to focus. We have a YouTube channel in which we have several videos. For example, this polygon applied to musicians, and then to see graphically the musician playing and looking at this polygon writing with them. You can find in youtube.com/infomuslab with the IML uppercase. You can see, you have videos, and we have several more about this research on social signals that can be intrapersonal, so the leadership of the orchestra of the body, of an individual, or interpersonal, and this is another perspective. But anyway, are features that are collected to an organism. That could be many people, some or many people, also an audience. One study that we did is using thermocameras, observing an audience and measuring the temperature of an audience on the basis of the stimuli of an art work that coming to the occurring into the stage. And so we did this with people located and with thermocameras and measuring the evolution, the slow evolution temperature of the people. Yes, with depending, and this could be used in a loop. So if you give the temperature of this is something that is perceived by artists, but to give back the feedback of the temperature of the audience to the loop. That there is a colleague of us, is Luciano Fadiga, with whom we had a European project, Siempre, called is a project on studying empathy, and he did this kind of approach during an opera, music theater opera in Madrid. He measured 2,000 audience, and he found clear peaks in certain moments of the opera that were, for example, so lower temperature when the character dies. Yes, when there is so yes.
The big area.
Okay, these are just examples of some speculations, but it could be interesting also to link the audience in, of course, as in many artistic projects. But I think that we can finish now, because otherwise we take too much time to the other projects. So I want to start to.
Anyway, for those who want to continue with us with illegible affects, the others can set up somewhere else. Now,
could you say briefly, Jaime, how you distinguish the term affect from emotion, the way?
Okay, that's a very important point. I am drawing there upon a number of people who are establishing a certain distinction, although my distinction is slightly different. So, I can tell you, for example, how Brian Assumi, who is also part of our project and who will be with us in July, distinguishes emotions from affects, which is not exactly how I do it. For him, emotions are the socially subjective, intelligible elements, whereas affects are a much broader spectrum of modes of affecting and being affected that are not necessarily reducible to an emotional category. They are not under the domain of the subjective, of what is socially intelligible as a subjective category. So he does a categorical distinction, which I don't share, between a domain of virtual, potential, unformed affections, the domain of formed, subjectively and socially established categories, which would be the emotions. Now, I think it's never quite possible to establish a categorical distinction. I think that in every recognizable emotion there are always unformed potentials of affects which are not categorized, and in every movement which is difficult to categorize, you may also be able to find emotional labels. So I keep a little bit of that distinction, but never separating it categorically. So what I mean is that in every movement there are elements, possibly various elements, various layers, even contradictory elements that you could label. And I think this ambiguity is interesting to analyze. How is it that a single gesture I do is possibly being interpreted emotionally differently by each of you, and even each of you, one single person of you, might be seeing that in one single gesture I do, you can see different contradictory emotional signals. Let's say that you are interpreting this gesture of mine as being at the same time aggressive and gentle.
Yeah, we're talking
for example. Yeah. So this complexity and ambiguity of how you interpret and embody, because it's an embodied interpretation, is how you are empathizing with movement through your mirror neurons, through how you are embodying this gesture. How each of you is, and now this connects to illegible affects directly. First of all, each of you has a different perspective. Let's compare this to a camera analyzing movement. Let's imagine that each of you has a camera with an iSWAP system or a different system. Now, each of you would have a different perspective, which means the features analyzed would be different in each case, even if you were using a camera to analyze my gesture. Now, let's jump to your own personal embodiment of my gesture, your own embodied interpretation of what I am projecting. My suggestion is that there's this ambiguity, that each of you might be seeing multiple things in each movement I do, multiple emotional labels, and also, apart from the multiple emotional labels, there might be an aesthetic continuum, as to use Sharon Sandner's words, non-utilitarian emotions, non-labeled emotions, affective aspects of my movement that are not reducible to any emotional label. So I think there's all these things happening all together. That is my suggestion, the complexity. So we have multiplicity of emotional labels coexisting with also an open field of affective, aesthetic dimensions that are not reducible to emotional labels. Is it clear a little bit how I distinguish emotion and affect or not? It's an important aspect.
Anyway, there is a literature on emotions in which you have discrete emotions with labels and continuum, like valence arousal or valence arousal powers that are continuum, in which you don't have necessarily labels, but you have at the same time a number of different stimuli that constitute the affective process that you are experiencing. And you don't have a verbal description of it, but only a measure.
Do we actually need labels, or we just need to know? Because I was thinking about sorry. Maybe I was thinking about do we need the labels, or do we just need to know if some movements are clearly inside a group? So, because we have the means of like grouping type of movements, but and this can be done like clustering. Let's see. I don't know if.
So you mean you have a map, geographical map, in which you have regions, each one is an emotion. Okay, very roughly speaking. So
but
we
don't know the labels of the emotion. We just know that there are groups.
Yes, there is. You have to do the training.
No, groups. Let's say
coherent.
if I can group the type of movements in these different groups.
You don't know. Like you don't know this kind of movement in each group.
Yes, but we can form these groups. We have some techniques, machine learning techniques, that can group the different types of movement. They can say, okay, this movement belongs to this group, but the groups are not labeled.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I certainly think
We don't.
For
Because
me,
you know
an
that
emergent.
there is this
Emergent.
group, and
well,
a single movement belongs to that movement, that group, but we don't know that. For example, that.
What means that group?
Yes.
that's of course, of course we don't need to. I mean, not only for me it's very problematic to use labels. It's very problematic to use labels because of all the things I've just said. Because I think that it's impossible to reduce a movement or a gesture, an expressive relation, to a label because it depends on the observation and the multiple ambiguities that are in it.
Yeah, I mean, like the Laurie Anderson, hello, goodbye. How do you distinguish that?
The Queen
Whether
of
it's hello or
England.
goodbye.
Yeah.
The Queen of England.
Yeah, the queen must be
The
ambiguous.
Queen of England.
Yeah.
Every queen does
And
that.
best friend, yeah.
So all the queens will do that.
The queens we always must be ambiguous. So, yeah, well, so
No, I mean,
that's a very interesting point. So can we use all these features, which are very, so what I'm interested to propose specifically now to all of them, we have here in the epistemology, ontology, in the tools developed by mindfulness, a very multi-layered system for movement analysis, which goes, in my view, far beyond what I was using years ago, like just with a stream of data flowing with a very simple, analyzing how many pixels change in the image from one frame to another. Sometimes slightly more sophisticated, but and certainly not like this. We have here many levels. We can keep at just a basic level. If someone wants, you can just keep the level of rough data, but still bearing in mind the mediations of how the machine, the camera, the software, there are so many levels of mediation that are operating even at the most basic level of mechanical data flow. So we can just use that by being aware of all those mediations, or we can use those other levels also being aware of all the conceptual, technical, mathematical, algorithmic mediations that are producing that model. And then we can intervene in all those levels as well. So we have a huge patchwork here of possibilities, which for me is crucial when we are dealing with movement and want to understand what's happening, how are we dealing with movement here. Now, my proposal, specifically in illegible affects, is how to generate an awareness of this open-endedness, this indeterminacy of expressive movement. And so I was giving you now an exercise, an example, this idea that if you would have, so the fact that we are using Camurri for analysis, that has a point, perspectival point of vision, and if some features, it's interesting, for example, the feature of a triangle, it demands a certain perspective towards the person. If you change, of course, that feature, the numbers of the feature are changing because the triangle is changing. If you are measuring the triangle of the hand and the face, each of you is seeing a different triangle. If each of you is using an isolated system with a camera, each of you will have a different measurement now of what triangle I am producing.
For us, is only one.
Sorry?
For us, is only one triangle. Is the first person perspective. So it's just the objective measure of this distance. So it's relative.
Okay, this is very important. So the
for
machine
us, otherwise it's not scientifically significant. So we have this distance.
So the software measures the objective distance.
relative position. And this triangle is the same if you go there. Of course,
Okay.
from the perceptual perspective, if I do the triangle here, you don't see it. So from a communication point of view.
But that's very important to see how it's different.
Yes, where is the camera?
Yeah.
Is, change the subjective experience, also the distance. Just
So this is
And the resolution of the camera.
But there we have a very interesting point. Look, there's the difference between an abstract measurement of distances that nobody of you is perceiving. That's very interesting. So the machine is measuring a triangle that none of you sees.
It is supposed
So
to
none of
be
you, if you measure from your perspective
It's relative.
a triangle that you see, that you perceive, it will never match the abstract triangle that the software is measuring. You see the point?
Because it's a physical measure. So the distance between my head and this hand
But-
is objective. I can measure as in physics. Sorry. It's not subjective. This is a matter
Yeah.
of... And also there could be an interesting approach is also not only the change of perspective, but for example, you can see the triangle, just to give an example, and you can consider the triangle, this as an element in a full resolution video image. Then you can subtract progressively information. So you have this triangle, but with a skeleton, or only 3 dots on a black background, 3 dots with a line, and so you see the triangle. So you can reduce progressively, and you could see, for example, does the communicative aspect, for example, the emotional aspect remains the same with subjects looking at the image. So you don't change the perspective, but you subtract information up to a level in which perhaps you lose completely the information. Because you can start from a real-life video, in which you can guess this triangle exists and implicitly you perceive. You can go back to a silhouette, back to a skeleton, 3 dots, head to hands, and you move only 3 dots or the triangle. So you can progressively reduce. Does information, significant information remains in this subtractive process when the, let's say, emotional communication stops and you don't perceive anymore anything? Or does remain a perception of a single organism, or at a certain point are 3 dots independent, like 3 ants that are going on the surface?
But going back to Stefano's question, I think it would be very interesting to deepen into that. So can we analyze group or single person activity according to complex combinations of all these features and data that remain irreducible to to a label maybe, they generate its own, I don't know, static continuum or
this needs, I think, quite a lot of work to be done because there are so many degrees of freedom. What I would move to, yes, just to move to an exercise that you propose.
Yes,
so we have something working now, like the autism exercise. Maybe you can experience, you can see how much the limits, the constraint, the limitation, and then you can guess, and so we start from something existing, and maybe for just to proceed with the experiments in Metabody, we can reshape, change the interface, change the output, but starting from something existent that does not require a long cycle process of software development and things. So this can be done now.
Yes.
So you can, if we divide into the groups, those interested in this can remain here and maybe experience this autism with a different perspective, different research questions as Jaime proposed yesterday. And at the same time, the Monster and the Motion Composer project goes on. Yes?
This is very related to this, the question I asked yesterday upstairs was, can we get a visual representation of those 60 features just on screen in whatever way, in some kind of graphic way, to understand or to start to understand what field of parameters are there, non-discretized into the emotions, but before that step, and to see what kind of matter, form, field there could be there.
Yes, this paper does exactly this visualization.
this was actually the purpose of this morning's talk, and we didn't get there because
I tried to push it in that direction.
Yes, but you want to have all the 60 at the same time.
Or
Actually,
set of the
mine turn out.
I mean, in graphs it's going to be very hard, but there are different.
Yes, to have at least some of them. Yes.
is there a schematic for each like
Sono non lavoro.
Sì, ma
Only once at a time you have now.
c'è qualcosa di
Sì, però non fa vedere.
Or we can vedere the feature. We can have a 5 minutes break and then we go into this. Because in this flash it is not, we should add displays and to put on screen. It's a matter of...
But maybe we can explain the ones that are embedded in the emotions analyzed in the experimental emotion plate. For example, discussed, like this issue.
Yes.
Yes,
I mean,
these features can be shown right now, but one at a time. Not every feature together.
I mean, for example, happiness. What features are in happiness?
No, the features are all the same, but actually we don't know. The problem of machine learning is that you don't know which feature is used to discriminate between animals because it's inside some sort of black box. You just feed the feature message in this box, and the box answers.
How is the box? The box is a number.
Yeah.
How does this is very interesting. So it's not a selection of features for each emotion.
No.
It's a very complex algorithm.
You just send all the features.
No.
I know.
There is a group of movements per emotion, each feature.
Yes, but we don't. The problem of machine learning is that it's some sort of black box. You just send all the extracted features, and the box answer these affects.
Features are gestures, movements, or group of movements.
The features that we discussed this morning, all these ones.
Okay.
And you just send all these features to to the black box, and the black box answers.
But then,
This is
how is the black box constructed? That's a
It's
very complex.
automatically.
The black box.
But for example, maybe, I mean, obviously you have to plug in some things like
This is the next one. You have a lot of examples that you know this is accurate.
In some way,
And you will train the black box.
whatever, before it goes into
It is not immediately ready, but we try to find the
database of.
We have another patch in which there is some features.
just to make sure that we
have identified the level. Like you said, this is happening, this is happening.
We have already a patch ready. We like box inside 60. Just
Okay. Now, look, people, this is interesting.
half an hour.
Stefano, can you repeat this? This is very
Okay.
important.
To
Machine learning.
teach the black box how to identify these emotions, you have a big database of videos, of data. You compute these features on this data, knowing in advance the emotion expressed in these videos, and then send them to the black box. And then the black box learns how to distinguish them. But you don't know which single feature is discriminative. Only the mathematics inside the box knows it. And this is
And you can know it. You are programmed.
yes. Actually, it's there are libraries because the mathematics behind this is
It's a complex
complex and yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in teaching the machine, did you avoid ambiguity? This is important.
No.
Or, for example, was
Yes.
there this gesture that maybe someone was telling the machine that it's happiness and someone else was telling that it was triumphant, whatever. So, was this happening? Whatever, yes. Was this happening in machine learning, or did you avoid ambiguity in teaching the machine? The machine only associates this with one emotion or with several at a time?
No, actually we before to get the right labels for each videos, we ask people to label this data. So a video that was labeled as happy was labeled by humans.
And so that process, did it arrive to one single label, or were there times in which one single video had several?
One single video as one.
You are teaching the system to learn these 6 emotions.
Yeah.
And in teaching, you don't teach something ambiguous, otherwise you confound the person. So and indeed for Otis, we did a careful analysis on how to do the video with actors, with the several details, and with a clear emotion, clearly, and trying to avoid any other reference to other emotions. So to have ones that is clearly emerged. And then so we teach the system, say, okay, this video is happiness. And so we give the input and the output that the system must learn. And we give hundreds of these short videos, and for each one say, so look at this is angriness. And so we give the video, and this is angriness without ambiguity at all. But the system, what construct, is a sort, at the end, of a geographic map. In this case, just to be naive, indeed, a map is a 2D, but this is a map with many dimensions that you cannot imagine in our mind. So it's a complex multidimensional map.
Actually,
in which,
the dimensions are like the dimension of the feature vector. So it's like 2000 and
okay, we cannot imagine
you can imagine a space with 2000.
How we imagine a 3-dimensional space, we could not imagine a 2000
This is
dimension.
black box.
This is the black box. So the black box builds a space, and you can look at imagine it as a geographic map, in which you have clearly regions in which inside there is happiness, inside this region. And so when you give a new input, the system uses what has learned and knows that if what you put as a new input falls into a region, you can evaluate if the distance to the barycenter the capital city of this region, the nearest, how much near you are to the capital of this city, is the strength of being belonging to this emotion. Just very simple. And this is the black box, what is doing. If you do a training with ambiguities, it becomes not a clearly defined set of regions, separate regions with also coherentness going from one region to another. Because happiness can gradually go to sadness, for example. You reduce, probably will reduce openness and joyful and energy, kinetic energy. So, and the more you go far away and go probably to sadness, the movement change in a coherent way, smoothly. But if you do a training set and you teach in a confused way to the system, this becomes a sort of, there are no clusters, no regions, but some like of chaotic points in which you get no information.
And yet, to me, the idea of a multidimensional space of that scale feels to me that it could be combined with an idea of ambiguity, because if you have so many layers, I don't know if I have understood.
Yes, yes. So the ambiguity is not to teach the system ambiguity, but to teach the system the correct way, and then you go into the edge between one region to another, for example.
The edge between regions or dimensions. Regions is dimensions in this case.
No. The regions, no. You can imagine like a geographic map, in which you have regions. And when you go to the edge, maybe and there are edges in which there are multiple regions touching each other, because are multidimensional. At that point, you are in ambiguity, because the system does not know which emotion is.